In this video, we're going to discuss how to use the Sapling electronic book. I want to discuss how to use the book in an effort to help you become more successful. This is a really good book, so just kind of bear with me for just a couple of minutes. First and foremost, do read the overview about statistics. It's only a couple of pages, and I think it's sort of, eye-opening and catching to why you should want to take the course, what we're going to cover, topics that we can discuss, things that we can discover as we move through this process. Again, it's a math course like no other. And then I think the first thing that I would encourage you to do is to go ahead, if you have an iPad, is to download the app. You can go on and you can get the Sapling app and you can log into the book with your iPad. It's a nice way to use the book so that you can have the book open with your Chromebook on the homework, and you can have the book open on the side, so to use the two in conjunction with each other. And the first thing that you're doing is you're essentially covering Unit 1 or Chapter 1 data analysis on your own, right? And this is one variable data. So by one variable data, we're just saying we have sort of like one list of things. Then we're going to talk about, in the first section, how to analyze categorical data. And then we're going to talk about displaying quantitative data with graphs. And then we're going to talk about describing quantitative data with numbers. And then at the end, I really haven't released anything in terms of wrap up, review, that kind of stuff. But each chapter will have a free response question. So it's a previously released AP question. Sometimes I refer to them as a frappy. And we'll always have some sort of, review questions and what does a test look like and all that kind of stuff. You'll have sort of a heads up on that. As you move through the homework, I just want you to know that homework is going to count for two things. It's going to count for homework. It's also going to count for a quiz. And the reason being is that the homework is graded, right? So the grade on this homework is going to follow you in two ways. And we'll go over more of how that's weighted and how that works at the beginning of the course. But the point is, don't just breeze through the homework. I want you to treat homework as if it were an assessment, right? And if you're having trouble with questions and you don't feel comfortable answering it just yet, then reach out to me for help and we can discuss it and go through it. But in essence, you need to read the book, right? You need to actually read the book. And it's not that you'll digest every last living thing, but you need to read the book. And as you read it, number one, you're going to be responsible for the learning target, right? So by the end of this section, right, in 1.1, you should be able to identify what individuals and variables are. Actually, this is an intro. This isn't even into 1.1 yet. What is an individual? What are variables in a set? And then talking about what makes something categorical and what makes something quantitative. And then you start to see these green boxes. So as I were taking notes, right, you should be taking them, right, and then keeping them organized. I would maybe surf through the whole section, just look at all the green boxes and grab all the definitions and then read after, right? And I don't know that I would read and write, but whatever floats your boat. Again, this is a personal thing on how you take notes. I don't want to totally dictate the whole thing because, again, this is a collegiate level class. You want to find a method that works for you, right? But we do live in a world of data, right? Especially over this summer when you hear everything about COVID-19, my goodness, right? Or about the election cycle, right? Everything is about data. And so data is plural, actually. The singular of data is datum, right? So you've heard people say, hey, don't drink and drive. You don't want to become a statistic. You can't be a statistic. A statistic is a calculation from a sample set. So the best you could do is you could be a datum in the set of values that were used to calculate said statistic. Anyway, back to how to use the book. Go through, grab the definitions, and then write down some questions. If you're not sure what you read, write down a question. Put it off to the side. Again, here's another definition. So we have individuals, right? What is an individual? It is an object described in the set of data, right? Individuals can be people, animals, or things. Sometimes individuals are referred to as observational units, okay? So it's very scientific, right? A variable is an attribute that can take different values for different individuals. So the information we collect are the variables on who? The individual. So if it says who's the individual, like like all of this stuff here are variables, right? Here's a list of variables, a list of variables, a list of variables, a list of variables, a list of variables. And all these lists are going to be either quantitative or categorical. Now, anytime you see a number, it typically lends itself to be quantitative unless it's not used like a traditional number. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's just say you weigh 115 pounds, right? So that number refers to a very specific weight. And if you were comparing yourself to somebody who weighs 120 pounds, you could say, well, the difference of our weight is 5 pounds, and that's meaningful. Versus, say I live at, my house number is 39, and my neighbor's house is 37. The difference of our house numbers is 2, but that's not meaningful. So these numbers, although they're numbers, they're not used in a traditional numerical fashion. I'm not going to add them, multiply them, subtract them, divide them. I'm not going to do things like that. The other thing, too, is when you see things like time in dwelling in years, it says 2 to 4, 2 to 4, 10 to 19. When you see numbers used in a range fashion, then we're going to call those categorical. We're not going to refer to them as quantitative. But again, this is in the reading. One thing to pay attention to are the exam tips, right? It says if you learn to distinguish between categorical and quantitative variables now, it'll pay big rewards later. I will say that knowing the difference between these two is just, it's monumental, huge. It'll be catastrophic if you don't know the difference between the two, and basically immediately. So again, keep looking for those green boxes, grab the definitions, but don't just write definitions, right? Don't just go through there, copy the definitions, and then move on, right? You need to read. And right here, the exclamation points, right? Not every variable that takes a number is quantitative. Read through here and that'll discuss a little bit more clearly what I was talking about in terms of using numbers in a numerical fashion. Now, this is what I think is the check plus plus of the book. So here we come to an example. So we've read a little bit, we've written some notes, and then we got to go to an example. Now, an example in a traditional book is just a static written example in the book. And you can read the example, right? And then when you come down to the bottom, when it starts to ask questions here, right? Here are the worked out solutions. So you could sort of cover this up and then you could work through those questions on your own and check your answers. That's the traditional method. Now, if that works for you, that's great. Method number 2 is to notice that there is a play icon. And when you push that icon, you will get a video that is a live professor in 1 minute and 42 seconds, walks you through the whole example step by step. So it's like live teaching in a minute and 42 questions. Very succinct, no sidebar conversations, just the information at hand. So that's pretty cool. Now again, at the bottom of the example, you'll notice that it'll say, hey, after you've done this example, you're ready to actually try a homework problem, like exercise number 1. Now there's an exercise number 1 in the actual book version of the homework. And if you press this link in your book or in the app book, again, whatever way you choose to access the electronic book, it's a hyperlink. And it'll bring you right to question or exercise number 1. And then here we are at exercise number 1. Here's another hyperlink. It's going to bring you to page 3. Guess what's at page 3? The example that goes with this. So if you're having problems with a homework question in the book, you can always jump right back to where the example was. No fumbling through the book to try to find out where that example is. And then also notice there's a play icon right here. If you press play, again, there will be a video that walks you through the whole problem, the homework problem, in 1 minute and 32 seconds. Now, I don't assign the exact problems from the book, but the electronic homework that you'll be doing will mimic ones that are just like the book. Sometimes they are the exact ones, sometimes they're not. So if you pay attention to where you're at in terms of the book, if you have the book open while you're doing the homework, you might see a question that's similar. Maybe you can kind of cheat your way through and press play and maybe learn how to do that question a little bit more fluently. Again, call it cheating or call it learning. That's really what's going on here, right? You're learning to stand on your own 2 feet, and more importantly, you're learning how to work through problems on your own. At the end, there's a summary. Again, this is not the place to go to and just grab everything, but it is a quick thing to just kind of look through and say, okay, yep, stats, individuals, variables, categorical, quantitative, discrete, variable, continuous, distribution. Did I get everything from this section? Do I have, all of that vocabulary in my notes? Do I have an understanding? You know what? I really don't understand what a continuous variable is. Let me ask Mr. Breckman that question when we get back in class. Okay, so that's the kind of stuff that you should be doing while you're taking notes and working on your homework. Of course, at any time in class or outside of class, if you have a question specifically, shoot me an email, right? Reach out and get it answered. This class is your class. I'm just teaching it, right? So make sure that you know what's going on. Make sure that anything I've discussed is clear to you, because I won't go back to it, right? Unlike other classes, we don't have time to spend multiple days on the same topic. We will move pretty swiftly. So stay current and always stay informed. Thanks for listening. Oh, and this is the app that I would suggest. If you look up Sapling Learning, this should come up. It's the Macmillan Learning ebook, and it's the same username and password credentials that you already had.